In the dying mist of dawn, a young warrior kneels before the rising sun. His sword rests beside him, silent, unmoving, yet it weighs heavier than any mountain. He has spent years chasing victory, yet peace eludes him. He wins battles, but loses himself. Each triumph feeds his ego. Each defeat fuels his fear. His master once told him, "True mastery is not in the strike. It is in the stillness before it." But stillness terrified him, because in stillness there is nowhere to hide. No noise, no war, only the mirror of one's own mind. And so begins his final lesson. A journey not across lands, but within. A battle not against enemies, but against the trembling spirit that refuses silence. This is the fearless path to mastery. The ancient samurai truth that the greatest strength is not aggression, but stillness. Not domination, but discipline. Not victory, but presence. When the blade stills, the warrior awakens. When the mind quiets, the path reveals itself. Chapter 1. When the blade trembles. The mountain air was sharp, cold enough to slice the breath from a man's chest. Beneath the fading stars, Hiro stood alone in the training yard, a single figure wrapped in fog and failure. His hands bled through the wrappings, his sword was dull with sweat, but still he moved, again and again. Strike, step, breathe, strike, step, breathe. The rhythm that once felt sacred now felt hollow, a desperate dance around an invisible void. Each swing of his blade was faster than the last, as though speed could drown the doubt that clawed inside him. The whisper of steel-cutting air echoed across the empty courtyard. To Hiro, that whisper was both comfort and curse, the only sound that kept him from hearing the noise within. From the temple steps, an old man watched. His master, Kaizen, the keeper of an art older than war itself. His eyes still as morning stone, his breath calm as a lake untouched by wind. He said nothing. He didn't need to. In the silence, Hiro's frustration became a roar. "Why do you watch and not guide me?" Hiro's voice cracked through the mist. He lowered his blade, chest heaving. "I train day and night. I move as you taught, yet still I lose. Why?" The master did not answer. He simply walked forward until his shadow merged with Hiro's. Then, without warning, Kaizen drew his own blade, fluid, effortless, inevitable. "Attack," he said. Hiro lunged. Their swords clashed, sparks like lightning. Again, again. Each time, Hiro pressed harder, faster, more desperate. Each time, Kaizen met him with less motion, less effort, less sound. And then, with one soft step, Kaizen disarmed him. The sword spun from Hiro's hands, landing in the dirt beside his knees. The master's voice was low, almost tender. "You move too much," he said. "The storm within blinds you." Hiro stared at the ground, sweat mixing with soil. His pulse thundered in his ears, the same rhythm that haunted him in every battle. He wanted to scream, to argue, to say that mastery required effort, speed, dominance. But something in the old man's tone cut deeper than the blade ever could. The master continued, "When the blade trembles, it is not the hand that is weak. It is the mind that cannot bear its own silence." He sheathed his sword and turned toward the rising sun. The warrior who fears stillness will forever chase noise. And with that, Kaizen left Hiro alone in the mist. The courtyard felt different now, too quiet, too open. Even the birds seemed to hold their song. Hiro sank to his knees, staring at his fallen blade. For the first time, he didn't see a weapon. He saw a reflection, his own trembling hands, his scattered breath, his endless hunger for validation. In that reflection, he saw the truth. He had not been fighting the world. He had been fighting the echo of his own unrest. A breeze moved through the courtyard, brushing the edge of the sword. It shimmered for a moment, not in brilliance, but in calm. And in that calm, Hiro felt something new. Not victory, not defeat, just presence, the beginning of stillness. But stillness, he thought, is the hardest battle of all. And so, when the blade trembled no more, Hiro turned toward the forest, seeking silence not as refuge, but as reckoning. Chapter 1. Part 2 night fell heavy that day, not on the world, but on the mind of Hiro. He sat before the dying embers of a training fire, the soft crackle, a faint heartbeat in the void. Around him, the world was silent. Inside him, chaos raged. Every moment replayed, the clash, the failure, the words, "You move too much." Each syllable gnawed at him, like a slow blade carving truth from pride. For years, Hiro believed mastery was built on endurance, the sweat of repetition, the perfection of form. He had measured his worth in bruises, his identity in how many he could defeat. But now, that definition had shattered. If motion wasn't mastery, then what was? He watched the coals collapse inward, glowing with quiet dignity even in their dying. There was something pure in their surrender. They gave light by letting go. And for the first time, Hiro wondered if perhaps that was the path he'd missed. That maybe mastery wasn't about holding on, but about releasing what no longer served. The next morning, before the sun rose, he sought out Master Kaizen once more. The elder was tending to a bonsai tree, his movements patient, almost sacred, each cut deliberate, each pause intentional. "Master," Hiro said, bowing deeply. Kaizen didn't look up. "Have you seen?" "Seen what?" "The storm that lives behind your eyes." Hiro hesitated. "Yes." "And does it frighten you?" "Yes." Kaizen smiled, a faint curve of lips that held centuries of understanding. "Good. That means you are beginning to see clearly. Fear is the first gate." He gestured toward the mountains that framed the temple. "Go into the forest," he said softly. "Take nothing. No sword, no food, only your breath. Stay until you can look at fear without turning away." Hiro blinked. "How long must I stay?" Kaizen turned to him fully now, his eyes like still water. "Until the blade within no longer trembles." Hiro obeyed. The journey into the forest was not long, but it felt endless. Each step away from the temple stripped something from him. The sound of steel, the comfort of structure, the illusion of purpose. By midday, he reached a small clearing, where a stream sang between moss-covered stones. He sat, he waited, but silence, he soon realized, was not empty. It was alive. The rustle of leaves whispered memories. The cry of distant birds carried doubt, and in the spaces between sounds, the mind began to speak. "You are nothing without the blade. You are weaker than the others. You failed your master." The voices rose from within, not from the world. They were the fragments of his ego, clawing for survival. Every man who seeks mastery must at some point face this chorus, the storm of the self. And like most, Hiro's first instinct was to fight. He closed his eyes and tried to force them away, to outbreathe the fear, to silence the noise by will. But the more he resisted, the louder it grew. Science today might call it cognitive resistance, the mind's defense against introspection. The samurai called it the shadow of noise, the mind's addiction to thought. By dusk, Hiro's body trembled with exhaustion. But beneath the fatigue, something subtle shifted. He began to hear, between the thoughts, a faint pulse, a rhythm quieter than breath. He followed it, not with force, but with attention. He inhaled, not to control the air, but to feel it. He exhaled, not to push, but to release. And as the night deepened, so did the silence. The voices dimmed, the wind softened. The mind, once a battlefield, became a field of echoes. Hiro did not yet understand what was happening, only that for the first time, the stillness didn't feel like emptiness. It felt like a presence, watching him back. He opened his eyes and saw the reflection of the moon in the stream, unmoving, perfect, whole, even in distortion. And he whispered to it, "Perhaps the blade does not learn by moving, but by remembering how to rest." The wind carried his words into the trees, and far above, in the temple beyond sight, Master Kaizen felt a subtle stillness in the air and smiled. The first gate had opened, but in silence, something stirs. When the noise fades, fear begins to speak, and thus begins Chapter 2. Beneath the Quiet Fear. Chapter 2. Beneath the Quiet Fear. The forest was a cathedral of silence. Tall cedars reached toward a sky that shifted from silver to pale gold. Dew gathered on Hiro's lashes as he sat cross-legged beside the stream, unmoving, his breath shallow but steady. He had been there for days, long enough that hunger no longer roared, but whispered. The first day, he fought the silence. The second, he feared it. By the third, he began to listen. In that stillness, fear became a voice. It didn't arrive with thunder, but with intimacy. It sounded like him. "You are wasting time. The world is moving while you sit here. You will return weaker." Every man who has ever paused to look inward has met this voice. The samurai called it Kage no Koa, the voice of the shadow. Modern psychology names it the inner critic, the evolutionary echo meant to keep us safe by keeping us small. For Hiro, it was the unseen enemy that training could never strike. He tried to outbreathe it. He tried to drown it beneath focus. But the more he resisted, the closer it came, until its breath was his own. He realized, you cannot fight what lives inside your silence. That night, rain began to fall. The forest came alive with scent, earth, cedar, decay, and renewal. Each drop against his skin was cold but awakening, like 1,000 tiny truths falling from the sky. Hiro's robe clung to him, heavy with water, yet he did not move. Somewhere between pain and surrender, he began to see. Fear wasn't trying to destroy him. It was trying to be seen. It was the child of every failure he'd buried, every judgment he'd believed, every demand to be more. He let the rain speak for it. And in that moment, a strange calm unfurled within his chest. Not the absence of fear, but the acceptance of its place in him. He remembered Kaizen's words. Face the silence, not with resistance, but awareness. Awareness, the art of seeing without reacting, the essence of both meditation and combat. In neuroscience, it is the shift from the sympathetic to the parasympathetic, from fight to flow. The ancient samurai found it through breath. Modern minds seek it through therapy or mindfulness. But the principle is the same. Stillness begins where judgment ends. Hiro breathed deeper now. He felt his heartbeat slow. The forest's rhythm merged with his own. In that alignment, a faint energy pulsed beneath his skin. What the old scrolls called ki, the life force that connects all motion and all quiet. He realized something profound. All his life, he had chased strength as something to build. But strength had always been something to uncover. Fear was not the wall, it was the doorway. As the storm passed, the moonlight broke through the canopy, touching his face with a soft glow. For the first time, Hiro didn't feel like a warrior stripped of purpose. He felt human, fragile, breathing, infinite. The forest, once an enemy, now watched him like an old friend. The stream murmured approval. Even the wind seemed gentler, as if bowing. And deep within that silence, a single truth rose like dawn. To master fear is not to silence it, but to walk beside it without bowing. He whispered it aloud, letting the sound dissolve into the mist. The words carried weight, but also freedom. Stillness was no longer an idea. It was an encounter with himself. But understanding alone is never enough. Awareness must be forged into discipline, and discipline into transformation. And so, as dawn breaks again, Hiro begins the practice that will reshape his soul. Thus begins Chapter 3, The Furnace of Calm. Chapter 2, Part 2. The forest was no longer silent. It was breathing. It moved through Hiro like a second body, slow, vast, ancient. Each sound, each scent, was no longer something outside him. It was within. Days turned to nights and back again. Time dissolved, replaced by rhythm. He would wake at dawn, meditate until his legs burned, then walk through the woods until hunger whispered. He drank from the stream, ate nothing. Every craving became a mirror, showing him how much of his life had been ruled by wanting. And then, on the seventh morning, fear returned. Not as a whisper this time, but as a storm. Memories flooded in. The father he failed to protect. The comrades who surpassed him. The master's silent eyes that once looked at him with hope. Each image was a blade. Each emotion, a cut he could not parry. He fell to his knees. His hands clawed at the dirt. The mind screamed for escape. Run, fight, do something. But another voice, quieter yet unyielding, rose from beneath the chaos. Stay. So he stayed. He sat in the mud, trembling, while the past tore through him. Every shame, every fear, every moment of doubt rose like ghosts, demanding acknowledgement. He faced them, not with resistance, but with presence. Tears came, slow and unbidden. And for the first time in years, Hiro did not wipe them away. He let them fall into the soil. They mixed with the earth, and the earth did not reject them. It absorbed them, without judgment. It was then he understood what Kaizen meant by the gate of stillness. Stillness was not calm. It was confrontation without aggression. It was the art of meeting everything: pain, fear, memory, and refusing to flinch. Science would call it integration, the process of reuniting the fragmented self. The samurai called it kokoro no seijaku, the quiet heart. For in silence, the mind doesn't die. It reorganizes. And what is reorganized becomes stronger than before. As night fell, Hiro's body weakened, but something else awakened, a current beneath thought. He could feel it pulsing from the ground, rising through his spine, spreading warmth through his chest. It was neither emotion nor energy. It was awareness itself. He understood now. Fear was not the enemy. The enemy was his refusal to feel. The blade that trembled was not in his hand. It was in his mind, shaking from avoidance. He whispered to the darkness, "I see you, and I will not run." And with that, the storm broke. Not with thunder, but with stillness so complete, it felt sacred. He opened his eyes. The moon hung low, a white lantern on a black sea. The air shimmered faintly. The world was the same, yet everything within him had changed. He was no longer Hiro the warrior, fighting for perfection. He was Hiro the witness, watching the rise and fall of all things, including himself. In that night of surrender, he tasted the first real freedom a warrior could know, freedom from the need to win. At dawn, he stood by the stream again. The water mirrored his face, but this time it was calm. Even the faint lines of exhaustion looked peaceful. He dipped his hands into the water, and as ripples spread outward, he smiled. The ripples reminded him of thought. They distort, they move, but they always return to stillness. Perhaps the mind, too, could do the same, if left untouched. He whispered, "Stillness is not escape. It is return." In that sentence, something sealed inside him, a quiet vow, born not from ambition, but from realization. He would return to the temple only when he had learned not how to fight, but how to be still in movement, to strike without trembling, to act without noise, to live as water lives, soft yet unstoppable. The forest had done its work. Fear had become teacher. Silence, the forge. And Hiro, for the first time, no longer sought to prove anything. He rose, bowed to the stream, and began his walk back toward the mountain. Each step was lighter. Each breath was whole. The warrior had not found stillness in victory. He had found it in surrender. Now begins the true training, where silence must move and calm must meet action. The forest forged awareness. The temple will test it. Thus begins Chapter 3, the Furnace of Calm. Chapter 3, the Furnace of Calm. The temple gates stood before him once more, unchanged, silent, eternal. But Hiro knew. He was not the same man who had walked away. The mountain air carried no threat now, only breath. Each inhale, each exhale was a ceremony of return. Kaizen waited in the courtyard. He did not smile. He did not speak. He simply turned and began walking toward the inner hall. Hiro followed, barefoot, steady, and without a single question. Inside, the hall was dark. Candles flickered against stone walls. Their flames danced without fear of wind. Kaizen stopped before the training mat. "You have met fear," he said softly. "Now, meet movement." From the shadows, a wooden sword, Bokken, was placed before Hiro, the same weapon that once trembled in his grip. He bowed and lifted it, but this time, the weight felt different. Less burden, more presence. Kaizen circled him slowly. "You learned silence when nothing moved. Now, learn silence in the strike." He lunged, without warning, without sound. A blur of motion, a whisper of air. Kaizen's Bokken struck like lightning. Hiro parried, barely. The clash echoed through the hall. His heart jolted, breath caught. Kaizen's voice followed the impact. "Still your mind, not your hand." They moved again. Strike, parry, silence, breath. Each blow was a test of balance, not strength. Each movement, a question. Can you act without losing stillness? Minutes turned to hours. Sweat fell to the floor like rain. Kaizen's movements were effortless, neither slow nor fast, simply inevitable. Hiro, though trained for years, now realized how much noise lived inside his body. When his strikes missed, frustration rose. When he succeeded, pride whispered. Both were noise, both broke stillness. Kaizen saw it and struck again, harder. The impact sent Hiro sprawling. His sword slid across the floor. "Do you see?" Kaizen said. "The sword does not fail because of weakness. It fails because of mind." Hiro's chest heaved. He closed his eyes, remembered the forest, the trembling, the silence, the surrender. He inhaled once, deeply, and on the exhale, everything dropped. Thought, fear, expectation. Only awareness remained. Kaizen attacked again. This time, Hiro moved, not faster, but cleaner. The parry came at the perfect instant, without tension, without delay. The wood met wood in harmony. No noise, no tremor. Kaizen stepped back. The faintest smile touched his lips. "Now you begin to understand Mushin. Mushin no Shin, the mind without mind. To act purely, without the interference of thought or emotion. The samurai called it the empty state. But emptiness was not absence. It was total presence. Hiro breathed in that word, Mushin. It felt like standing in the eye of a storm. The world still moved, but he was unmoved. Kaizen placed a hand on his shoulder. A still mind is not a dead one. It is fire without smoke, movement born of silence. For the next 7 days, Hiro trained without pause. He swung the sword in rhythm with his breath. Each stroke, a meditation. Each pause, a prayer. When his muscles burned, he observed. When exhaustion whispered, "Stop," he bowed to it and continued. The pain became not an obstacle, but a teacher. Discipline was no longer about control. It was communion. And slowly, movement became effortless. His body no longer fought to perfect technique. It simply expressed truth. Every gesture was alive, yet quiet. Every strike, a reflection of the silence he had earned. By the 7th evening, Kaizen called an end. They sat facing each other in stillness. Candlelight flickered between them like the pulse of time. "You have entered the furnace," said Kaizen, "but fire is only the beginning. To master stillness, you must carry it into noise." Hiro bowed deeply. He knew what awaited: return to the world, where stillness would be tested by chaos itself. Thus begins Chapter 3, Part 2, where Kaizen sends Hiro into the nearby village to face the chaos of men, the noise of ego, temptation, and distraction, and to learn how stillness behaves when the world screams for reaction. Chapter 3. Part 2. The village below the temple buzzed with life. Merchants shouted over one another. Children ran through narrow alleys. Blacksmiths hammered steel that rang like thunder. For the first time in months, Hiro felt the weight of the world's rhythm pressing against his silence. Kaizen's parting words echoed in his mind. Stillness means nothing if it dies in noise. Hiro walked slowly through the chaos, every sound piercing the calm he had built. His breathing deepened, steady and deliberate. He noticed his heartbeat trying to race and smiled faintly. The world had not changed. Only his awareness of it had. At the center of the marketplace, a brawl erupted. Two men locked in rage over a spilled drink. Old Hiro would have stepped in to stop it, muscles tensed, voice commanding. But now, he simply observed. He saw the tremor of fear in their eyes, disguised as anger. He felt the noise within them, the same noise that once ruled him. He whispered to himself, "There is no enemy, only reflections of our own unrest." The fight ended as quickly as it began. The men, exhausted by their own fury, walked away. Hiro moved on, unshaken. Stillness, he realized, was not withdrawal. It was mastery of energy. Later that night, he sat beside the same pond behind the village, mirroring his morning meditations in the temple. The moon trembled in the reflection of the water, yet the surface remained calm. He knelt, resting his sword beside him. Its blade caught the moonlight like a silver flame. The sword and the self, he thought, both mirror the mind. If one trembles, both are lost. He began to breathe, slowly, rhythmically. Inhale, the cool air of night. Exhale, the heat of every thought. Each breath peeled away another layer of ego, another demand for control. Hunger visited him like an old companion. The stomach growled, the body ached, but Hiro did not move. He remembered Kaizen's lessons. Discipline is not suppression. It is remembrance of what truly matters. He sat until dawn, until even discomfort became sacred. The mind that once screamed for movement now obeyed the rhythm of life itself. When he opened his eyes, the forest shimmered with morning light. Birdsong filled the air, not as noise, but as symphony. The wind carried the scent of earth and rain. Every sense awakened, yet nothing disturbed his inner calm. Days turned into weeks. He ate little, spoke less, trained in silence. The boundaries between his breath, the trees, and the sky began to blur. He no longer felt like a man mastering a skill, but a consciousness remembering its origin. Once, during training, his blade cut through the air with such grace that even the falling leaves seemed to pause. There was no effort, no thought, only flow. It was as though nature itself moved through him. That evening, Kaizen came to the pond. He watched from afar as Hiro practiced, the air vibrating with quiet precision. Every strike was measured, every step infused with intention, yet free of control. When Hiro finally sheathed his sword, Kaizen spoke. "Do you know why the masters of old spoke little of their art?" Hiro turned, silent. "Because mastery cannot be spoken. The moment you name it, you lose it." Hiro nodded. He understood now. Mastery was not a peak to reach. It was a presence to maintain. It was not found in achievement, but in awareness. That night, they shared no words. They simply sat side by side, listening to the hum of the crickets, the slow rhythm of the pond's ripple. Two warriors, one teaching, one learning, yet in that stillness, they were one. As dawn broke, Kaizen rose and spoke his final lesson of the furnace. When you can move without mind, eat without hunger, fight without hatred, and love without attachment, then stillness has entered your blood. Go now. The world will test what the mountain has forged. Hiro bowed, his forehead touching the earth. He knew his training within the temple had ended. But the true discipline, the living stillness, was only beginning. As he descended the mountain once again, the valley opened before him, vast and luminous. The silence inside him no longer felt fragile. It felt unbreakable. And as the first wind of the lowlands touched his face, Hiro whispered, "The fire within me no longer burns. It illuminates." When tested by the noise of the world, stillness becomes strength. Now Hiro must face the final trial, not of survival, but of the self reborn in conflict. Chapter 4. The Duel in Silence. The wind carried the scent of rain and iron. Hiro's sandals touched the dirt road that wound toward the village he had once called home. It looked the same. Wooden houses leaning into the wind, rice fields trembling beneath clouds, but something had changed. Perhaps it was the air, perhaps it was him. The people recognized him immediately. The boy who had left a storm now returned as a still pond. Their whispers followed. "That's the one who trained under Master Kaizen. He left broken, but look at him now." Hiro bowed to them gently, not as a warrior to witnesses, but as a man greeting life itself. Peace radiated from his movements. Each step seemed to speak without sound. "I am here. I am whole." But peace, in a world built on noise, always calls its opposite. By sunset, word had spread of his return, and with it, the challenge. Rio, the champion of the valley, had waited years for this moment. Arrogant, sharp, and ambitious, he had once trained beside Hiro before their paths split. To Rio, Hiro's silence was not mastery. It was weakness, disguised as calm. He sent his message through a courier. "Meet me at dawn by the river's edge. Let us see whose path is true." Hiro accepted without hesitation, not out of pride, but out of purpose. He knew this duel was not about blades. It was about the remnants of the self, the ego he had yet to face. That night, he sat by the same pond that had watched over his transformation. The surface reflected both moon and memory. He saw the boy who once trembled in fear. He saw the man who fought himself through silence. And in between them, this moment, the still point between past and becoming. He whispered to the water, "Let this be the final mirror." The dawn came shrouded in mist. The river was silent but alive, its surface breathing softly under the rising sun. A ring of villagers gathered, some curious, some fearful, all expectant. They came for a fight, but Hiro came for peace. Rio arrived dressed in crimson, his armor gleaming, his presence loud. His eyes burned with the hunger of validation. When he saw Hiro, calm and unarmored, he sneered. "You call yourself a samurai. You look more like a monk." Hiro bowed deeply. "Then I thank you. Monks do not kill needlessly." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Rio's jaw tightened. He unsheathed his katana with a hiss that cut the morning stillness in two. The blade flashed like lightning, but Hiro did not move. Rio lunged, the sound of rushing steps, steel cutting air, yet Hiro remained still, grounded like a mountain. At the last instant, he shifted, barely, a whisper of motion. The attack missed by the width of a breath. The crowd gasped. Rio spun, furious, striking again and again, his power fueled by noise and pride. But Hiro's defense was effortless, fluid, invisible. Each movement arose only as needed. No more, no less. He remembered Kaizen's words. Stillness is not the absence of action, but the absence of waste. For the first time, Rio faltered. He was sweating, panting, fighting ghosts. Hiro, in contrast, seemed untouched by gravity. Then it happened. One perfect moment of silence between their breaths. In that sliver of stillness, Hiro saw everything. Rio's anger, his own reflection within it, the endless cycle of men fighting shadows. And in that pause, his sword moved, not with violence, but inevitability. The flat of his blade struck Rio's wrist. The rival's sword clattered into the dirt. Silence. Hiro stepped back. He did not raise his weapon again. He simply bowed. "The duel was never between us," he said quietly. "It was between noise and silence." Rio froze, his chest rising and falling with disbelief, shame, and something else, understanding. The villagers watched, confused by the lack of blood, the absence of victory. But those who truly saw, the elders, the children, the quiet ones, knew they had witnessed something sacred. Hiro sheathed his sword and turned to leave. The duel had ended before it ever began. As he walked past the crowd, a single boy called out, "Sensei, why didn't you finish him?" Hiro smiled faintly, because the battle was already won. Rio, consumed by confusion and pride, seeks Hiro later that night. What unfolds is not another duel, but a reckoning between teacher and student, ego and presence. A conversation where silence becomes sharper than any blade. Chapter 4. Part 2. The storm broke that night. Rain poured down over the village, steady, unrelenting, cleansing. The duel by the river had ended hours ago, yet the air still hummed with tension. Some villagers called Hiro a coward for sparing his opponent. Others whispered that he was something more than human, beyond anger, beyond pride. Hiro paid no mind to either. He sat beneath the thatched awning of an old tea house, watching the raindrops strike the ground like 1,000 tiny drums. Each sound dissolved into the next. Each droplet disappeared into the soil, forgotten yet eternal. He closed his eyes and let the rain speak. Its rhythm matched his breath. The world was full, yet empty. This, he thought, was the truest form of silence. Footsteps interrupted that quiet. Heavy, hurried, uncertain. Rio. He stepped into the dim glow of the tea house lantern, soaked to the bone, his pride stripped raw. His sword hung loosely at his side, unpolished, trembling in the rain. "Why?" Rio demanded, his voice breaking through the storm. Why did you stop? Why didn't you finish it? Hiro looked up. His eyes were calm, but not cold. Because there was nothing left to fight. Ryo slammed his fist against the wooden post. Don't speak in riddles. You humiliated me before everyone. You took everything. My honor, my pride. Hiro rose slowly, his movement as quiet as a breath. Then perhaps what you lost was never truly yours. The words hung in the air like thunder, waiting to fall. For a long moment, only the rain answered. Hiro stepped closer. His voice softened, not to soothe, but to reveal. When I struck your wrist, I saw myself. The same hunger, the same fear of being unseen. I fought that shadow for years, thinking victory would silence it. But ego cannot be killed. It can only be seen. Ryo's expression faltered. His anger cracked beneath confusion. Seen? Yes. When you see the ego clearly, it loses power. You stop feeding it through struggle. Ryo looked away. His reflection shimmered in the puddles, distorted, trembling. Then what becomes of a warrior without something to prove? Hiro smiled faintly. He finally begins to live. They stood there as the rain slowed to a whisper. Lightning flickered in the distance, painting their faces in flashes of silver. In that illumination, Hiro saw the truth of Ryo's pain. Not arrogance, but a longing to be enough. The path you walk, Hiro said, is not wrong. It is simply unfinished. The blade you wield must cut through illusion, not flesh. Ryo's breath quivered. He sank to his knees in the mud, sword beside him. The weight of the years, the battles, the endless pursuit of approval, all poured out of him in a single exhale. Then teach me, he whispered. Teach me how to be free. Hiro knelt across from him. He placed a hand over Ryo's sword and gently pushed it aside. First, he said, put this down. You cannot hear silence when you are still holding on to noise. Ryo obeyed. The sword fell with a soft thud into the earth. The sound was final, sacred. For a long time, neither man spoke. Only the steady hum of the rain, the soft sigh of wind through bamboo, and the faint beating of two hearts, synchronized not by conflict, but understanding. Hiro finally broke the silence. The purpose of mastery is not to stand above others, but to return to them with clarity. The true warrior does not conquer. He restores. Ryo looked up. In his eyes, the reflection of something new, peace, fragile, yet alive. And what do I do now? Hiro smiled. Begin again. But this time, walk the path without fear of being seen or forgotten. Just walk it fully and listen. Ryo bowed deeply, forehead pressed to the earth. When he rose, his gaze was no longer that of a rival, but a student. The storm ended. The first light of dawn broke through the horizon, piercing the clouds. Hiro stood in that light, silent, still. The rain had washed away everything that was false, leaving only presence. He turned toward the mountains where Kaizen's temple slept beyond the mist. And in the rhythm of the wind, he heard his master's voice again, faint but eternal. When the duel ends, the true training begins. Years later, Hiro becomes the quiet teacher he once sought, the one who no longer fights to prove, but to guide others toward the stillness that defines all mastery. Chapter 5. Where Stillness Speaks. The seasons turned like quiet pages of a sacred book. Years drifted past the valley, painting the forests gold, the rivers silver, the mountains white. Time, which once felt like an enemy to conquer, had become Hiro's oldest companion. He lived in a small wooden house by the pond, the same pond that once reflected his trembling spirit. Now, it reflected peace. Students came from distant provinces to seek him. They brought questions, techniques, ambitions. They came chasing mastery. He received them all with the same words. Before you can master the sword, you must learn to master silence. At first, they were disappointed. They had expected a warrior cloaked in legend, a man whose strikes split the wind. Instead, they found a quiet presence, tending to a garden, drawing water from the well, bowing to the sunrise. No armor, no trophies, only stillness. Yet slowly, something in them began to change. They noticed how the air around Hiro seemed to move differently, calmer, slower, yet alive. Even the insects near him buzzed softer. The leaves seemed to fall more gently. It was as if nature itself obeyed the rhythm of his breath. Every morning, Hiro led them to the pond. There, he knelt and touched the surface of the water. The ripples spread outward, delicate, precise. "This," he said, "is how your mind should move. Responsive, but never reactive." He spoke rarely, but when he did, each word carried weight. Like stones dropped into a still lake, their meaning rippled long after the sound had faded. One student, a young woman named Aiko, was particularly restless. Her strikes were sharp, her spirit fierce, but her eyes betrayed the same fire Hiro once carried. She sought strength to protect her family, to control her fate. After a month of training, she confronted him beside the pond. "Master," she said, "why do you keep us from sparring? Why not teach us to win, to fight?" Hiro placed his sword across his knees. "You wish to fight?" "Yes," she said firmly. "I wish to be strong." He nodded. "Then first, learn to be soft." Her brow furrowed. "Softness is weakness." Hiro smiled gently. "Is water weak? It yields, yet carves mountains. It bends, yet shapes stone. Softness is not the opposite of strength. It is its completion." He rose and handed her the sword. "Strike." She hesitated. "With all your will," he said. She struck. The blade cut through air with a hiss, but Hiro simply sidestepped, letting the motion pass as though it belonged to the wind. Again, she struck harder, and again, he did nothing. Her frustration rose, her strikes faster, her breathing shallow. When at last she faltered, Hiro reached forward, gently pressing her sword arm down. "You see, you were not striking me, you were striking your own fear." Aiko dropped to her knees, panting, tears mixing with sweat. "Then how do I win?" "By no longer needing to." The words pierced her deeper than any blade could. Hiro sat beside her, voice calm, almost like a whisper. "Strength is not what you take from the world. It's what you can hold without trembling. Your fear of loss blinds you. Let it pass through you as the wind passes through the reeds. Only then will your sword speak truth." She closed her eyes. For the first time, her breathing slowed. Silence filled the space between them, and in that silence, something shifted. The lesson was not heard. It was felt. Hiro watched her reflection in the water. It was the same reflection he had seen in himself years ago, fighting ghosts, mistaking movement for mastery. He smiled faintly, realizing how life had come full circle. The student before him was the echo of his own journey, and he was now the mirror his master once was. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the pond glowed in amber light. The forest sang its evening hymns. Hiro whispered to himself, "Stillness teaches through generations." The voice may change, but the silence remains the same. Night falls, and Hiro enters his final meditation, the closing chapter of his path. The students sleep, unaware that their master's greatest lesson will come not through words or motion, but through the silence he leaves behind. Chapter 5, Part 2. The night settled over the valley like a soft shroud. The moon hung low, pale and perfect, reflected in the still pond that had witnessed a lifetime of storms. Cicadas hummed faintly, the forest breathing in unison with the man who had once been the trembling boy by this very water. Inside the wooden house, Hiro sat cross-legged before a single candle. Its flame wavered slightly in the draught, then steadied, just as his own spirit once had. The students slept nearby, their swords resting against the walls. The world was quiet, and in that quiet, Hiro felt something shift. Subtle, deep, eternal. He smiled, knowing. It was time. He had walked the full circle of the warrior's path, from fear to discipline, from discipline to silence, from silence to freedom. Now, the final step awaited. Not death, but dissolution. The return to the great stillness from which all motion arises. He breathed in, long and deep. With every inhale, the world expanded. With every exhale, it disappeared. The candle's flame bent toward him, as though listening. In the quiet of his mind, voices from the past began to stir. Soft, almost musical. The echo of Kaizen's teachings, the laughter of his younger self, the first whisper of fear he once tried to silence. Now they spoke in harmony. "Do you see, Hiro?" Kaizen's voice said. "You were never meant to destroy fear, only to walk beside it." He bowed his head slightly, eyes glistening. "Yes, Master. I see it now." "Then what do you see?" "I see that stillness was never a goal. It was the truth that waited beneath every strike, every breath, every heartbeat. The silence was always speaking. I was just too loud to hear it." The flame before him flickered brighter, illuminating the scrolls on the wall. Ancient words from the samurai code, Hagakure, the way of the warrior is found in death. But Hiro understood now. Death was not the end of life. It was the death of attachment, the death of noise, the death of self. That was where mastery lived. As dawn approached, the students awoke to an unusual stillness. The world felt heavier, sacred. They walked quietly toward the meditation hall, guided by instinct more than routine. Inside, they found their master, sitting upright, eyes closed, face serene. The candle had burned down to its final ember. The pond outside was so still, it seemed to hold its breath. Aiko stepped forward. She knelt before him and whispered, "Master." There was no answer, only presence. A presence so full that it overflowed, filling the air, the earth, the heart. The students wept, not from sorrow, but from reverence. Aiko looked to the pond, remembering his words. "When your mind moves like this water, you will know what it means to be free." The surface was flawless. She bowed deeply, tears rippling the reflection. That night, the students built a small shrine beside the pond. They placed his sword upon it, its blade catching the moonlight like a final breath. No words were carved, no prayers recited, only silence. Because silence was his teaching. Silence was his legacy. Years later, travelers spoke of a school, hidden deep within the valley, where students trained without words, without competition, without anger. They said the place felt alive, that even the wind there moved slower, as if listening. And in the center of that stillness stood a pond, unchanging, eternal. If you listened closely, the water seemed to whisper, "The greatest warrior is one who no longer needs to fight." Core moral. Mastery is not the conquest of the world, but the quiet command of one's own spirit. Stillness is not escape, it is return. And when the blade stills, the warrior awakens. In the end, the warrior does not conquer the world. He conquers himself. Stillness is not the absence of motion. It is the mastery within it. Every strike, every breath, every choice becomes a mirror of the soul. The path was never about victory or defeat. It was about remembrance of who you were before fear began to whisper. So when the noise of life surrounds you, close your eyes, hear the silence that remains. There, that is the sound of mastery. To master and build yourself, consider subscribing to this channel and start your transformation journey today.